on reflection, I realized I was slowly proving to myself that I could change without having to fall back into bad habits. And I think the exact same concept applies to running and fitness, right? When you eventually maybe do earn like a bigger amount or you do start investing, if those foundational things are not locked in, you'll do less of the correct things with more money. My financial status was also being like reflected in how I saw myself physically, and I don't just mean like from a vanity or like vain perspective. It was actually how I took care of myself.
Can you just introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about you?
Yes, of course. So, Devamsha, I recently left my full-time corporate role, and I think that's just been my defining tagline so far. I left 6 months ago, and I was in corporate consulting for 3 years during that time, and then I was in corporate audit for 3 years before that. And I basically, before I started my corporate job at uni, I just had a really up and down relationship with money. But I also had this like, since I was 13, I'd always wanted to start a YouTube channel. It's been on my like New Year's resolutions goals list for a really long time. And basically in COVID, it was probably like a year and a half into my grad scheme. I was really struggling with money as I feel like a lot of struggles got like
Yeah.
amplified during that time. Money was my thing, and because we were like locked indoors, I basically got encouraged by my partner to just start my YouTube channel. And because I was struggling with money at the time and my fitness, to be honest, I focused all of my content around money and therefore started a journey on a tangent as a content creator. And then that just kind of evolved to the point where, yeah, 6 months ago, I left my corporate role to like pursue entrepreneurship as a whole with content creation as like a kind of like side thing because it's really helped my personal brand. And it brings me to this podcast with you today, where, yeah, I've done a couple of cool campaigns and you found me.
That must have been quite a nerve-wracking jump, was it? To say kind of I'm done with the corporate world. I'm gonna bet on myself fully here. How was that decision kind of made, and what does that feel like now, 6 months on?
It's a very layered answer. Also, I'm not good at short stories, so I'm gonna have to take you back. But leaving my corporate job for me was very difficult because I have been conditioned both culturally from like my upbringing, my parents, and generally the culture that the South Asian culture I've grown up in, and also with my own like lack of self trust at the time. I never believed in entrepreneurship as a path for me. I always thought that it would, if I ever did anything business related, it would be on the side of my main stable career that I could actually talk about. And I also used my corporate job as a way to almost convince whoever I was talking to that like, okay, I'm smart, I'm accomplished, I'm just like you. And it was a way to just get that like little injection of
Yeah.
validation from whoever I was talking to. Like even now, I struggle when someone says, "Oh, what do you do?" And I can't say, "I'm a management consultant at a big four company." Like I can't just immediately convince them of my worthiness. So leaving was a huge jump because I had to officially let go of that title. I couldn't rely on it anymore as a factor of like I know what I'm doing with my life. And also money wise, it's not I don't have a stable income anymore. I don't have guaranteed like benefits, pension contributions, all the side things that I talk about in my content is very different for self-employed slash business owners. So yeah, it's been a huge leap because I'm adjusting to a sense of myself I was not comfortable with for a really long time. But then also from the practical side, I'm actually having to think about how am I going to earn my money? How am I going to set myself up to future proof my finances? How am I going to generally live as a non 9 to 5 person, which is everything I've ever known?
It's so interesting. I relate so much to a lot of what you just said then, because that feeling that you don't know what to say to people sometimes when you're maybe in a different space. It's such a weird feeling, and you're kind of worried about what they're going to turn around and say to you, right? Like, I've been a radio presenter day to day now for 11 years, and the amount of people that still say to me, "When are you going to get a real job?" It's like
Wow.
it's so often, and sometimes like normally it's a generational thing, like, and you kind of have to try and explain to them, no, this is like this is like my career, like I'm basically a plumber, like
Yeah.
that. It's just my thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's my trade, and y- that kind of acceptance is sometimes hard to come by, isn't it?
Yeah.
Internally, to be like, look, this is what I do. Just kind of take it face value.
Yeah, it's definitely like I'm adjusting. I would say I'm better now, like 6 months on. I'm adjusting to the reactions and not really needing the reaction to be anything like and not take it personally, basically. I've had that a lot where if I say creator or something to the social media, I get the, "Oh, so you're an influencer. Oh, you just get loads of free stuff." And some people are joking and some people, um, are probably not joking. But I don't mind because now I don't mind because I know what I'm doing, right? I think the whole like, if taking a step back from everything I just said about, like, this being such a huge leap and like a psychological adjustment, it's like I need to accept that it's okay to not be in a stable 9 to 5, and it's okay to not be this big corporate superstar, and it's okay to be, like, figuring a relatively new career out and talking about it publicly. Like, I don't need anyone else to think I've got everything figured out. So it's definitely an internal an internal kind of validator, isn't it? That you need to, like, rein in before making a decision like this because you can't depend on other people's reactions to make you happy or satisfied.
At the same time, it's such a powerful position to be in as well, isn't it? Because yeah, you're not, in a big four company or whatever, but you're your own company. You're your own person. You're hopefully in the future going to be your own big four. Like that's the thing. It's like you're putting yourself in a position that in the future, if you're investing in yourself, hopefully down the line will put you in a better position than maybe you would have been if you had stayed in that corporate job.
Yeah, definitely. I think that speaks to having like a bit more of a open growth mindset towards life rather than like coming from scarcity or lack. And like I've grown up, I've spent a lot of my life in a scarcity, closed-minded mindset, even though like I'm a third culture kid, so I've grown up in like a couple of different exposed to a couple of different cultures. My parents are not from the same culture I've grown up in. And it's given me a very, like I feel like I could do anything in the world, but I also have grown up thinking that I need to do that alongside a corporate job, right? So that scarcity mindset, I was stuck in this bubble of thinking that if I do anything big, it will be within the confines of a corporate job. And it's now leaving that I think, okay, well, from a practical sense, there's no ceiling on how much I can earn. Like,
Yeah.
I could make my bonus as big as I want it to be, right? But from a, like, mindset sense, that is actually what I can do, right? I'm not actually confined by anyone else's rules, and I think that when you understand that and the potential, then it makes it a lot less scary. So yeah, you're completely right. It's definitely like a mindset thing going into this kind of job.
You mentioned COVID, and you mentioned, being in a bit of a difficult financial place and being in a bit of a difficult physical place. And I'm sure that's something a lot of people can relate to. Like personally, I certainly relate to that as well, particularly from the physical side of things. Was there a switch that kind of changed to be like, look, I need to sort myself out here financially, or I need to kind of get back to a bit of a better physical position or a better health position? Or was it something that kind of just happened over time and then one day was kind of like, I need to sort this out?
For the finances, it was definitely a bit of a rock bottom because it wasn't a dramatic rock bottom, but it was like I was looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, I don't want to feel this crap about my finances ever again. Like there must be a way I can turn this around and not make it a cycle that I fall back into because I was basically in a position where I was constantly in my overdraft and that was for like 6 years. I'd never not been out of my overdraft for longer than 2 weeks. And I because of COVID and getting my grad job and getting like sucked up into being an adult in the real world with like real expenses and things like that, I ended up in like 6 to 8K of credit card debt. So I was struggling with like a lot of financially driven shame and guilt during COVID. And that's what kind of triggered the whole looking at myself and not wanting to feel those feelings anymore. And in COVID, it just felt very loud because I was stuck in a cycle of like buying things, as a lot of people were, buying things, not having anywhere to necessarily go to get any sense of, I guess, like dopamine or any other feelings that I could have gotten via that I was actually trying to get via buying all these things and getting myself into credit card debt. And I'd just come so before COVID, I'd been to India to see some family the summer before COVID, and I bought this really random finance book in a bookshop that was local to my granny's house. And during COVID, started reading it, and honestly, because I was bored. And it was, I think, a combination of having this like top of mind awareness of these budgeting techniques, these light ways to increase my wealth, that I thought, okay, I could just try this and I could document it. And also being a YouTube baby and someone who'd always wanted a channel, I was very aware of people who had like businesses on YouTube, but also had made finance content themselves. So I was also like doing a lot of like self-educating at the time. And it just kind of dominoed into building good financial habits and getting out of that mess. And then realizing that, okay, being a creator has meant that I've learned all these other things, but then I've also increased my income, which means I'm also reducing my like cost of living. And it was just, like like a what's it called? Like a snowball.
Yeah,
It kept
yeah,
like
yeah.
getting bigger and bigger. Yeah. In terms of what I was learning and how my financial situation was improving. And then it was on that journey that I kind of realized that my like my financial status was also being like reflected in how I saw myself physically. And I don't just mean like from a vanity or like vain perspective. It was actually how I took care of myself was correlating with how I was taking care of my finances. And when I was in a good spot financially, I would find naturally that I was like more motivated to actually take care of my body. And then when I wasn't, I was completely trashing it. Like I did not care about it at all. So I realized that link and then started to focus on how I took care of myself and my mental health and my physical health as a means to actually maintaining my financial health as well. So it kind of all snowballed into each other, but it definitely started with that kind of look in the mirror in COVID when I was struggling.
It's it's such a interesting correlation, and yeah, something that I'm sure a lot of people listening to right now are probably thinking about has happened over their lives. Like there are definitely times where I'm sure a lot of people have been, and it does kind of feel like everything's on top of you sometimes, doesn't it? You're like, why is all of this happening? Like the bank is red, I feel terrible, like mentally and physically. And then other times where you're like, okay, everything's kind of in the right kind of on the right trajectory, I guess. I think it's really difficult sometimes, isn't it, when everything's going badly to be like, I need to make change for change to happen. And a lot of people do a big thing, don't they, straight away? And whether that be financially or physically, they'll think, right, I'm going to pay for 2 months of personal training 3 times a week for 2 months. I'm going to make a big change, and then that is going to change. And then after that 2 months, they fall off. It's like, I'm going to throw X amount of money in my savings or try and clear this amount of credit card debt. And I'm going to put myself in such a hole with one payment rather than doing it consistently over time. Then that kind of just puts them on a backtrack again down the line.
Yeah.
It's all about those little things, isn't it? Those small changes. Did you find that kind of initially when you were making those changes?
Yeah, 100%. Like I had to make small changes because I physically couldn't make a big change. I I had certain limitations as to what I could change. And you're so right in terms of like that defining moment for me was realizing that nothing changes if nothing changes. And my small changes came about by like I it was a small change also reflected through small kind of focus as well.
Yeah.
I took a decision to clear my credit card debt and I decided to focus on nothing else. Because I also want to highlight, like, I was throughout my fitness journey and also my financial journey, I've always been chasing a feeling. And the feeling with finances was not having that sense of shame and guilt around my bank account and what I could and couldn't do with my money. So I started by, putting like tiny bits away to clear my credit card debt. And when I did that, it was that, it was a small win after that was finished that took like 18 months. Um, and once I did that, I thought, okay, I have this like sense of self-trust that's building
Yeah.
that I can actually do this. Like I did it. So that means I could do the next thing. So then I changed my focus to consistently staying out of my overdraft, building up a little overdraft buffer. And then I overcame that. And then it just turned into like, okay, I can do this, so I can do that. And it was like building those like self-confidence blocks, which I never realized at the time I was doing that. It was just on reflection, I realized I was slowly proving to myself that I could change without having to fall back into bad habits. And I didn't need anyone else to tell me that. It was just a sense of like, I'm going to stick to what I said I was going to do, which was transfer this amount into a savings account and not touch it. And hope that I'll do this again the next day and the next day and the next day. And then one day you just look back and you're like, oh my God, I've done like 5 crazy things. And I'm not anywhere near the person I was 2 years ago. And I think the exact same
Exactly.
concept applies to running and fitness, right? And I applied that to my running and fitness journey because I realized this is a repeatable formula. Like
Yeah.
I've life hacked self growth.
It's insane. Like you could literally, if I was to, clip this conversation for the last 2 minutes and title it running journey or financial journey,
Yeah.
it would be exactly the same. Just
Yeah.
because it's that consistency over time, it's that discipline almost when you don't want to be disciplined, and then it's that um, stepping back and looking at the view and thinking, "Oh my god, it's because I've taken all these little steps that I'm at this point." Like you're standing on a start line and you're in good shape, and you're going to go and run something you've probably never run before because you put in the work, you've had the discipline, you've got up when you don't want to get up. The same thing with the financial freedom side of things, or the getting yourself back to a better financial position is the little steps, and then you suddenly stand back, you open up your banking app, and you're thinking, I can clear that debt. Like that feeling of turning up for yourself must be, now looking back, kind of a defining moment of where you are.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's like it's a defining moment because it's given me the biggest realization ever that your sense of self-esteem and your self-trust defines your ability to do anything. And like the little steps that I took for my finances was building up that self-trust. The little steps that I've taken to transform my approach and sense of my own like physical capability was so small and it depended completely on self-trust. And you're so right in terms of the self-trust builds when you build those like small or do those small acts of discipline when you don't want to. And I also think you're so right in terms of like it was a it's funny that it was a defining moment for me and it reflects this huge change in who I am, my habits and my approach to life. Yet I've not made any big changes. I made loads of small changes. Like I've never once made some drastic crazy decision. It was all down to that one decision to put £200 into a savings account that snowballed and built the little self-trust blocks and has now become this big change that I'm talking about on a podcast. So, yeah, I think you're right in highlighting that, and I think that's hopefully a really encouraging thing for someone to hear that you can I think big changes are made of small things. You don't actually have to go out and plan this, like, big move or this, like, big decision that has to be strategic and is going to then change you and define you for the rest of your life. It, like, doesn't have to work like that at all.
That initial moment's so scary though, isn't it? Like when you initially think, I'm going to try and clear 10 grand off my credit card, or, you stand on the scales and you haven't maybe done that in a little bit, and in a position that you never thought you'd be in, or, you know, you look down and you think, oh God, like seeing that's so scary initially. Um, how do you get started? Is it just literally taking that first small step?
I think even before you take that first small step, you need to completely forget about, like, the big picture. I think that the big picture is just too overwhelming. And, like, if we actually just switch to even, like, running examples, I ran my first half marathon last year, and I remember, like, I was really bad at sticking to my training plan because all I had in the back of my head, or actually at the front of my mind, was the fact that I have to run, what was it, like 21
21.1.
kilometers. That's all I was ever thinking about was that, "Okay, I'm gonna have to do this massive run in 12 weeks." And it would overwhelm me to the point where I would put off my training runs, I would shorten them, I would not give them my all, even though my training runs were never that long, right? So it's definitely a case of forget about the big picture because that's always coming, and you're like, that's the end goal. Like, that's the thing you're gonna be doing regardless, so you don't need to actually stress about the fact that it's there. Um, and if I, like, think back to me and how I made that small change for my finances, if I thought about the fact that I was changing my life, that would have been so overwhelming to the point where I may not have made those small decisions. All I really needed to focus on, and what I did focus on, was the fact that, okay, I'm sitting down today and I'm clearing my credit card debt. That's all I'm doing. The rest, what happens after, doesn't matter. And that's easier to do. Yet the bigger picture is guaranteed by forgetting it. So I would actually just suggest to not even think about the bigger picture, but take those, like, small steps that are aligned to the bigger picture. And then that just makes the bigger picture inevitable.
I think when you unlock that bit of information as well, it feels weird talking to you about it because I feel like I'm lucky to have been through things where, I understand that as well, that you do kind of chunk things down, whether it be running or finances or whatever. Some people haven't yet unlocked that small little bit. And I feel like when you get that small little bit of information and when you unlock that and you kind of start to understand that it's the pieces of the puzzle that will lead to the full puzzle, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. It becomes so, yeah, it feels like you're opening the doors to Narnia or something. Like it's so different, isn't it? It just it's so means you feel a lot less stressed about life when you realize if you take the small steps, the big picture will kind of normally follow.
Yeah, and it's that sense of self-trust again.
Yeah.
You have to know in yourself that, like, I'm taking this small step and I trust that it's going to lead to the bigger thing. And you don't need to see the bigger thing to have that self-trust, but needing to see the bigger thing to have the self-trust creates the lack of self-trust. I don't know if that's made sense as a sentence, but that's how I see things. Like, if I focus too much on, like, okay, I need this next step to be the exact right step in order to change my life, I'm basically saying to myself, I don't trust that by doing this small thing and focusing on this small thing, the bigger picture, the bigger dream is going to come true.
Someone
So,
someone once said to me, "It's like a game," and that's the other thing that I kind of look at now. If with every aspect of life, really, but I definitely think financial. When you just look at it as a game, like I need to complete this level is clearing my overdraft. I need to complete this level by building up an emergency fund, or I need to complete this level by saving us enough money to do my driveway or whatever. And when you like treat it like you're playing a game, it's a nice way of thinking about it.
yeah, actually, I really like that. Actually, it completely removes the stress and the heaviness it feels of, like, oh, I'm changing my life right now.
Yeah, definitely. What are the biggest and most common things that you see people doing with their finances that you consider maybe mistakes if they're looking to get to a position of um, financial freedom?
I think there's a couple. One of them we've kind of covered quite well in terms of like focusing too much on the big change and ignoring the small changes. I think that is a big mistake just because it overwhelms you to the point of not actually doing the actions necessary to change your financial standing. And the biggest thing that you need to do is actually change something. So whatever's stopping that is a mistake, in my opinion. But obviously not an uncorrectable mistake. And then the second thing I think is actually just focusing too much on like the the I want to say the non-boring stuff because it's kind of not boring, but I also don't want to call the boring stuff boring. So what I mean by that is focusing on things like your emergency fund, like knowing what you're doing with your monthly salary if you're being paid monthly, knowing that you have sinking funds for the things that you spend money on, like the day-to-day stuff that people tend to skip past in favor of, oh, I want to start investing or I want to start earning double my income and like getting more financial padding every month. Like I think we jump too far up when it comes to finances because if you jump too far up and you don't kind of think about your emergency fund and how you're actually addressing your pay slip and your like monthly spending habits, when you eventually maybe do earn like a bigger amount or you do start investing, if those foundational things are not locked in, you won't you'll do less of the correct things with more money. And it all comes down to like um I always use this example of 50 Cent going bankrupt when he essentially had made it, right? He's almost like a household name, but he's still going bankrupt. It's because it doesn't matter how much money you have if you don't know how to actually manage it and take care of your essentials, you'll still mismanage a bigger amount. So I think it is really important to lock in on those like foundational things and really if you can perfectly like manage and make do with your absolute minimum amount that you're earning right now, you then know that you have the capability to earn more, but also put it to good use and actually make it do the things you want that money to do if you're looking to like financially free yourself or save more for a wedding or a house or a holiday or retire early, whatever it is, you can do those things because you've got your current habits on lock. So I think, yeah, those are the two biggest things I think we focus on a bit too much.
I think sometimes, and we've been lucky enough to have like loads of athletes on this pod over the years, professional athletes, people that have done big challenges. I know you did something with Johnny Davis recently, which we might chat about in a second, actually. But a lot of people listen and, or a lot of people look at athletes and they think, look, th- th- they got it locked. They know what they're doing. Like they're going to get up and do that run every day. And I think sometimes people are shocked when professional athletes say, yeah, like every day is difficult. Like some days I don't want to get up and go for a run, or some days I, want to go and get a takeaway or mess up the diet or whatever. Do you feel like that as well in terms of the financial side of things? Do you still have those wobbles, have those days where you think, oh, I do really want to buy this thing that I don't really need, or if I just kept a little bit more out of my savings account this month, I could maybe do this. Do you still have those things, and you kind of those moments you have to check in with yourself and be like, no, this is for the kind of the greater good and the bigger cause?
I definitely feel myself like I had my spending habits reflected a lack of self-esteem and like belief in like a big future for myself, right? So I definitely feel that pull sometimes in terms of like if I'm socializing, I feel pressure to like buy more. Like if it's like drinks or food or something like that. Whereas now I'm a bit more in tune with like understanding that I could spend, but I don't have to spend. And the same kind of applies to my spending habits. So I still feel those urges of like, I wanna buy these things because it's gonna fill this like hole in my life right now. Or like if I'm sad, I know that I will go and scroll on websites or like find a way to get that dopamine hit through
Yeah.
spending, right? But I'm so much more aware of it now that I will like actively do it rather than passively do it. So I still experience those like little wobbles emotionally, but I don't necessarily act on them. I've got to a place now where I can observe what's triggered those emotions, and I can allow myself to go through the motions, but I know that the bigger picture is that I'm not going to actually blow my budget on this thing or blow my savings or move any money around. I'm going to stick to my guns because that's what I've done the last few years, and it's almost like I've created this like portfolio of proof that okay, I can have these wobbles, but I can push past them and I can still go forward towards my goals. I don't have to necessarily like fall back on myself.
Portfolio of proof is such a nice phrase. And I think that's something people can apply to probably every aspect of their life if they're trying to do something, whether that be athletic, financial,
Mhm.
in their personal life, building that portfolio of proof. I'm gonna steal that one. I like that.
It's really good.
Yeah,
I
it's
use it a
really
lot for
nice.
my running actually. Like I use my half marathon as a way for me to just get up and run on the days that I'm like, "Oh, I'm not a professional runner. I don't have to do this distance or like I don't have to get up and do this thing. I'm not an athlete. I'm just an everyday person." But then I'm like, "Well, no. I've done this thing that not a lot of people have done.
Yeah.
So that means I can get up and do this thing."
And it's that proving yourself right that's so powerful. I feel like I've used the word powerful a lot in this conversation, but it is. It's like it's you can do this. You can clear that debt. You can run a half marathon. You can run a marathon. And sometimes people turn around and say, "Oh no, like it's different for me. It's different for me. Like I can't run a marathon. You just don't get it. No, I can't run." You're like, no, no, genuinely now, if you put in the work, if you just get up day to day, start slow, go lamppost to lamppost, you're gonna be fine. And it must be the same sort of feeling you get when you go to events like um the the one that you did with Johnny and in collaboration with Experian as well. Like you're sharing this knowledge and people are like, no, my credit card debt's so bad, like I can't do this, I can't get out of this position that I'm in. You're like, no, genuinely now, you can. It's
Yeah.
just about taking those initial steps. Sharing that knowledge with people must be quite it must feel quite good.
Yeah. You tried to not say empowering.
I was gonna say powerful.
But no, it feels awesome because like I didn't grow up with wealth. I didn't grow up with a sense of what to do with money. I struggled for so long with these like feelings. And I feel like because of that, I just feel like I'm in the heads, especially of those like students that we ran the event with for Experian with Johnny. I knew the feelings that they had around money and I knew those like limiting beliefs that they had. I knew that all these young people tell themselves that I can't do this because I'm not that person. Like I'm not a content creator who's quit a corporate job. I can't do that. And I did that. Like not even that long ago. That was I got my grad job 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago. I don't consider that a long time for the changes that I've made in my life. So I love talking about all this stuff because I am a living, breathing example of the fact that if you make a small change, you can do it and you can build up that bank of the portfolio proof. You can actually just build it up. So yeah, I just love speaking about it, and that's what honestly drives me to continue to show up and create all this content is because I want to keep showing that proof that anyone could do what I've done. It just takes that tiny moment of like self-belief.
I'm gonna put all the links to all of your channels and things in the bio of this, but I wanted to speak about them briefly because I think another way of keeping yourself accountable, particularly in the financial space, is having people like you that make amazing content on Instagram, on TikTok, in your ears when it comes to a podcast. Like having those little reminders on a day-to-day basis in your timeline when you're scrolling to be like, I am making good decisions and this is why I'm making good decisions. If people want to kind of find you and a little bit more about what you do and just get reminded of you on a more common basis, where are the best places for them to go?
Um, I'm literally everywhere except Twitter. Um, I'm on, I would say YouTube and Instagram is where I post a lot of my financial topics, and I'm going to start sharing a bit more about my fitness journey on TikTok as well. But yeah, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and it's always going to be my name or my full name, Devamsha Gunput.
What's next for your fitness journey then?
I'm trying to put on a lot of muscle right now. And continue with my running. So hopefully, my goal right now is like a few 5 unassisted pull-ups, and I want to try and get a pistol squat. So it's very strength based right now in terms of what I could do in the gym. And then next year, I would love to focus on getting my 5K time down to 25 minutes.
Unreal.
Um, which is insane to even say that. Like it just speaks to everything I've said in this podcast. Like I would not have even considered saying that out loud about myself and my running capability, but I'm sitting here making those goals.
It's those lessons again, isn't it? I know we've mentioned it loads of times already in this conversation, but it's those small changes that lead to a point where you're like, I am going to run under 25 minutes, or I am going to, get X amount of my emergency fund or whatever. Like, it's like they run parallel, but one teaches lessons for the other and the other teaches
Yes.
lessons for the other, which is really cool. We'll finish with this because I've loved this conversation. I feel like genuinely I could just talk to you for the rest of the morning, but I know you're very, very busy. If if people are listening to this now and they are thinking about making that change or they want to make that change, I feel like we've covered a lot of probably what they would need to do to take those first steps. But what would be your main advice to them to take those first steps and to try and, get to a point where they're more comfortable, not only in their finances and their fitness, but just in themselves in general as well?
I would think about like if you fantasize or you have this like dream about yourself and what they do either with their money or with their fitness, I would think about what the absolute basic, like minimum viable version of that dream is, and what someone acting with that minimum viable dream would do tomorrow, and just do that thing. Because like that's kind of what I did with my money, right? Like the absolute basic version of my dream self had no credit card debt. So tomorrow I'm just going to try and clear that. Yeah, so definitely just find that like very basic level of action that you can take, and then take it as soon as possible. Don't think too much. I want to actually also emphasize that, like reducing the time between thinking about doing something and then doing it. Just act fast.